We're doing Developmental Psychology, Unit 12 by Duong and Chelsea Ireland.
Developmental psychology examines how people are continually developing physically, cognitively, and socially from infancy through old age. Developmental psychology begins with conception. After conception, your fertilized egg becomes a zygote. Then your zygote forms into an embryo. During this process, your heart begins to beat and your organs begin to form. The embryo turns into a fetus, and this is where your stomach is fully developed and the fetus is responsive to sound.
After birth, newborns return towards the touch of the cheek when they are hungry. To answer whether a baby can hear, smell, think, and see, scientists study habituation, which is the decreasing responsiveness with repeated stimulation. Infants prefer sights and sound for social development. Within days after birth, the brain's neural network is stamped with the smell of its mother's body. Infants can hear, see, and smell what they need, and they use this for learning.
You're born with the most brain cells you'll ever have in your life. Your motor development sequence is universal. You roll, sit, crawl, and walk. Twins tend to go through motor development simultaneously. After motor development is maturation and infant memory. Maturation is the biological growth processes that enable orderly changes in behavior.
Cognitive development includes cognition, which is all the mental activities associated with thinking, knowing, remembering, and communicating. Piaget developed and administered a children's intelligence test and noticed that children make similar mistakes of those of the same age. Piaget's study led him to believe that a child's mind develops through a series of stages. He proposed two concepts. First, we assimilate new experiences. We interpret them in terms of our current understandings. But as we interact with the world, as we adjust or accommodate our schemas to incorporate information by new experiences.
Piaget's stages of cognitive development include, from birth to nearly 2 is your sensory motor stage, from 2 to 7 is your pre-operational stage, from 7 to 11 is your concrete operational stage, and from 12 to adulthood is your formal operational stage.
Adolescence is the transition period from childhood to adulthood, extending from puberty to independence. During adolescence, people go through puberty, which is when their secondary sex characteristics are now more prominent, such as body hair and voice quality, and they now can reproduce. Adolescents often ponder and debate human nature, good and evil, truth and justice. They go through pre-conventional morality, which is self-interest, to conventional morality, which is upholding laws, to post-conventional morality, which is reasoning of formal operational thought. Morality involves doing the right thing, and what we do depends on social influences.
Our identity is our sense of self. According to Erickson, the adolescent's task is to solidify a sense of self by taking on various roles. Positive parent-teen relations and positive peer relations often go hand in hand. Adolescence is typically a time of diminishing parental influences and growing peer influences. Hereditary and parent and peer relationships make up an identity.
Our physical abilities are the highest in our mid-20s. During middle adulthood, a woman will go through menopause, where they naturally end menstruation. Life expectancy differs in males and females, where females are expected to live longer. In later adulthood, visual sharpness, muscle strength, reaction time, stamina, and senses all decline.
Early adulthood is the highest point for learning and memory. This is studied in 3 phases. Phase 1 is the cross-sectional evidence for intellectual decline. Phase 2 is longitudinal evidence for intellectual stability, and Phase 3 depends on both. Cross-sectional study is when people of different ages are compared with one another. Longitudinal study is done on the same person over long periods of time. In Phase 3, there is crystallized intelligence, which is our accumulated knowledge and verbal skills, which increases over time, and fluid intelligence is our ability to reason, which decreases over time.
In adulthood, there is a social clock, which is the culturally preferred timing of social events, such as marriage, parenthood, and retirement. Adult commitments include love and work. Successful aging is influenced biologically, psychologically, and social-culturally. In death and dying, grief is severe when a loved one dies before the expected time in the social clock. Facing death with dignity and openness helps people complete the life cycle with a sense of integrity, which is the feeling that one's life has been meaningful and worthwhile.
Harry Harlow conducted the monkey study on attachment. He recognized that the monkey's intense attachment to the blanket contradicted the idea that attachment derives from the association with nourishment. Attachment is an emotional tie with another person shown in young children by their seeking closeness to the caregiver and showing distress on separation.
There are 3 parenting styles. Authoritarian parents impose rules and expect obedience. They would say, keep your room clean. Permissive parents submit to their children's desire. They make few demands and use little punishment. Authoritative parents are both demanding and responsive. They exert control by setting rules and enforcing them, but they also explain the reasons.
Nature versus nurture questions how genetic inheritance and expense influence our development. Continuity in stages questions whether development is a gradual, continuous process, or does it proceed through a sequence of separate stages. Stability and change questions if our early personality traits persist through life, or do we become different personas as we age.
Dr. Kubler-Ross came up with 5 stages of accepting death. The first is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance.